What's your high score? This is Illiterate. This week we are covering Sonic the Hedgehog. My name is Evan. I just checked out the top movie this weekend at the box office.
My name is Taylor, and I got into the history of accidents with giant inflatables.
Oh, man.
Here we go.
This was not really one that we were planning on, but with it, the talk after the weekend, and also perhaps maybe being, I don't really believe him, but it might be Jim Carrey's final performance. We thought what a good opportunity to get into video games again. We haven't done video games in a while. Check out Mortal Kombat as one of the last ones I think we did there. So Sonic the Hedgehog, Japanese Mickey Mouse. I mean, that's about the closest thing I can really say. I mean, he really is Mickey Mouse level ubiquity.
Brand recognition, kids recognize him, and for decades and decades.
I really have a limited, and I know, rake me over the coals. I'm a bad millennial, but I really have a limited touch with this character. This is an auxiliary character for me. A lot of my friends, obviously, growing up in the 90s, love Sonic. It wasn't really something that I knew anything about. So this, I saw the movies now, but this is a great opportunity to get into this character, get into this property, because I promise you it's so much bigger than you would really think. There's so many people, I know people love Sonic, but there are people like me, that go, yeah, Sonic's a video game character. He's so much more.
And just like his speed and roller coaster antics, there's a lot of ups and downs to making him what he is, or even figuring out what he is. So we're going to get into all of that. My tease at the beginning research of giant inflatables, I hope that this makes sense in terms of an allegory for Sonic, because I also, as a part of looking into everything that he featured prominently in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade as a character. And if you're not in the US, that's just the thing that happens in the holiday where there's big balloons going down New York City streets. First video game character ever to be a balloon.
Yeah.
In 1993. Although very year, he got stuck on a light pole, ripped him open.
Ow!
The lamp crashed, injured a kid and a police officer.
Oh, no.
I'll post a link to the news video. Nobody died, but people got hurt. But kept going, eventually hit another tree in 95, and then there was unknown damage
and he's still out there somewhere.
Yeah. Well, 97, there was something that happened. So basically for those years, they used B-roll for the people watching on TV, and then he got retired. Yeah, because he just didn't actually run. So then
So it was a lie?
It was a lie.
I was watching, I'm almost certain I was like crazy about it right at that's Lost World. I was all about it. Yeah. 97, baby. I was watching. They lied straight to my face.
Yeah, that's the power of television.
Yeah. Oh my God. It was an interesting thing too. I think they did a similar thing recently where people weren't sure if there was a Rock, like the Rock Johnson giant inflatable last year or the year before. He had a show coming out on like ABC, and it was a promo. It was made to look like it was part of the show, but people thought it was actually still part of the show. And so it was mass hysteria online as to whether or not it was in reality a Rock Johnson.
Well, now with deep fakes and everything, right? Well, but anyways, with Sonic, he was retired after all that, and then came back in 2011 for the 20th anniversary. And then a couple years later, caught another tree in 2013.
No.
And so he didn't return until just last year in 2021. Being the first video game character, he also has the record for the most removals of any balloon in the parade. In and out, and up and down.
See, I'm just saying, they ought to show us this. That would be so much fun to see it just going wrong. I don't know, sorry. Yeah. Don't show me B-roll, show me the hysteria.
Yeah, so that's a great heads up to where he's headed. There's just in and out and retired and back and B-roll.
Lord, I had no idea. As far in my mind, he's like he's Santa, almost. He feels like just part of that whole event.
That's what they want you to think. But yeah,
good.
In his life, in video games, in other media, he's all over the place. But we got to start from the very beginning. He is a character most definitely born of the 90s, and then also born of the synthesis of America and Japan. Go back and listen to our Godzilla and Kong episode if you want another great synthesis of characters.
Oh, yeah.
From across the world.
I mean, just cultures passing the ball. I mean, I loved it.
So Video game, little bit of inside baseball. 1988 is when the Sega Genesis released, and
We're going online. I'm
this beat out Nintendo's Super Nintendo in terms of time. It came out before. 2 years later, though, the Super Nintendo comes out, and Nintendo is in 25% of US homes. It beat Toyota as Japan's most successful company. This
Wow.
thing is massive.
Yeah.
The big game, Super Mario 3, made as much money in the US alone as E.T. did when it came out in the
Wow. Oh
'80s.
my
So
god, yeah.
this what does Sega have? Alex Kidd, which you've never heard of, but that was what they were trying to make their competition to Mario, which was
Oof.
absolutely no contest.
Oh god. God,
I th
I've never heard of that, and
Exactly, yeah.
that's it's still hurting.
The game is fine, but it was kind of a Mario clone, and so they said, "What are we gonna do? We just put out a new
Oh.
console." They put out their new console. We thought we beat them to it.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So enter, and these are the 3 people and areas of the game that we're gonna cover: programming, art, and level design. We'll start with programming because that's what the Genesis was trying to do differently foremost. Yuji Naka is the guy who is the head on Sonic, and he's like, "What can we do to compete in this arena?" And the
Mhm.
big thing, the Genesis was just more powerful. It had over double the CPU of the Super Nintendo,
Oh, wow, yeah.
and one of the things that people lamented in the NES days was the saving feature, because a lot of times it just didn't like, if you died completely, you had to start back at the beginning of the entire game, you know what I mean?
Good lord, yeah,
So
yeah,
it's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
this is when now we see, like, speed runs, because that's what people would do. You'd have to speed through, you'd memorize the early levels and just try to get through them as quickly as possible,
Right.
and so he's like, "Oh, I wanna mess with this idea, the fact that we have this higher processing. Let's do something where the character goes super fast, because that's what we were doing anyway with this."
Right.
So the character's default speed that they were gonna do was set to Mario's running speed. They're like, "As fast as he went, that's gonna be our default."
Got him.
Got him.
Play that.
Yeah. Though there were tons of animation problems, it was shaky, flickering, buggy, all kinds of stuff that they have to work with, so he's credited with creating this algorithm to help with the fluidity, especially on curved surfaces, which you can see where that's going. But they're
Ah.
like, what character can we use with this feature and the premise behind the programming technology
Mhm.
aspect of it? They're like, what are fast animals? A kangaroo, a squirrel. There was a rabbit with prehensile ears that could maybe grab stuff. They're trying anything. Thus comes the art side of it now.
I like the parameters building around it. That's,
Yeah,
when these things emerge, it really becomes confining or
constraining.
empower
Yeah.
empowering constraints is what they call it,
Yeah.
something like that in school. So, but I think that's such a it's like the bumpers on the lane if you're bowling. At some level, those parameters are really defining the realm of the character, and it's so important to be cognizant of that when you're putting things together, to not get like caught up in being like, oh, it's not cool, I want him to have a red scarf. Hold on, you know what I mean,
Yeah,
you know what I
yeah,
mean.
exactly. Well, and especially with video games, and with somewhat with
Yeah,
films, but definitely not with novels, it's like there is a technological limitation. Of course, you would wanna do the most epic, amazing, realistic thing, but you can't. You
exactly.
only have so much memory and RAM, and yeah.
There's a step here. What's important? What is the need here? And I loved it. How fast are people going?
Yeah.
That's a problem. How do we solve it? We're going to create a character to solve it. That's what I'm talking. These parameters really defining the space of the
Yeah.
character.
So with that now comes the what character are we even gonna do? Naoto Oshima, he worked with Naka on the Master System games and the things that came
Hmm.
before, so he was on a trip in New York when the call from Sega comes, play around with some of these ideas, draw out, like, an old guy with a mustache, because Mario is that. Like, can we do something riff it almost like Shrek, Like, how can
Yeah,
we
yeah, yeah.
riff off of this? Do something spiky and then something dog-like, just give us something here.
It's red, blue.
Yeah, exactly. So he's in New York, he draws all these things up, surveys some randos in Central Park, and they like the hedgehog idea that he came up with the most, and I'll post a link in our show notes for some of these initial sketches and photos and whatnot, because
Hmm.
this is all available, and then there's a great art book of the history of Sonic the Hedgehog that I looked at that has a lot of this stuff.
Oh, that's cool. I love art books are
Yeah.
like one of my favorite resources, absolutely.
Yeah.
And don't sleep on our show notes. They're sick.
Yeah, all the visual elements to it.
Mhm.
Speaking of which, one of the things, because they're trying to compete with Nintendo and they know kids are the ones playing video games at this point, they really want a easier character that a kid could draw. That's a big
Yeah.
consideration with
That's
this,
yeah.
because that was one of my things. I didn't have a lot of video games as a kid, but I was drawing Sonic in middle school for sure, or trying
Boom, they
to.
got you.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's it. I mean, and again, there's another little parameter to kind of, well, what's something that will be easy for kids to replicate, think about.
Yeah, yeah,
That's something that'll be easy to get stuck, something that they can do.
very much.
That's very cool.
And then Sega comes back with, "Well, then how is this us? What differentiates?" And then there comes the color blue because it matches the Sega logo. And I guess also it's
Mm.
probably counterpoint. Mario is traditionally red, red hat.
Mhm. Mhm.
Nintendo's logo is red, so they wanted to do something different there. And then Sega is giving Oshima some keywords. They're like cool, challenger, history, because the cool and challenger is really because they're the underdogs to
Right.
Nintendo and they wanna be cooler than an Italian plumber.
Oh man, steep hill to climb there. I wonder what we can do cooler
Yeah,
than that. I don't
Blue
know.
Hedgehog, yeah. But the history thing was curious, and I found an interview that Oshima did later where he's saying, "Well, I had to come up with we want this to feel like it has as much history as a Western American cartoon character." Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So
Yeah.
this wild story that he came up with that only came out later, but it actually informs a lot of the tone and style. So, and this is all made up in his mind to get to a blue hedgehog. Keep this in mind.
So this is like an internal
Yeah,
thing
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
they had when it wasn't released until much later,
Yeah.
but they've had this going off of it for a
Or at
while.
least he did, and then he
Yeah, yeah,
he
yeah, yeah.
said so his whole idea, there was a pilot in the 1940s who was nicknamed Hedgehog because he liked speed. He was this ace pilot, and when he flew, his hair went back in spikes.
Hmm.
He also drew on his plane this nose cone art. You know how sometimes they make it look like a shark or whatever on
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
biplanes. He did a hedgehog, and then he had a hedgehog insignia on his leather jacket. Later, this guy would have married a children's book author, and her stories were inspired by him and became this Sonic the Hedgehog story that is now a video game.
Whoa.
So all this is made up in his
Yeah.
mind, like I said. But what's so
So he gave it like he gave it like a Western farm
yeah,
pilot,
yeah,
fighter
yeah.
pilot, wife takes it and it turns what and he gave it this whole like
Lore
he
to it, yeah.
wrote a Disney movie
Yeah.
beginning to
Well, and that's kinda what he like I said, that's that Western
that's
American,
beautiful.
yeah, so what's crazy I
All
yeah.
listen, I'm almost now that you tell me that, I'm almost sad that's not part of the movie. But you
Yeah,
can't do that because people would be, like, actually believing it, but, like,
yeah,
there's part of me that like,
that's cool,
wants
yeah,
an element yeah, no, it's at least that what e even if it's, like, made up for him,
mhm,
there's something very fascinating about that, for him to have this very in detailed backstory, even
yeah.
American backstory. That's really interesting, and there's a lot there that like I almost feel is a missed opportunity to not incorporate some element of it. I'm not saying that it has
Yeah,
to be that, you know what I mean?
yeah.
But like a taste of it, a hint of it. That's pretty rich.
Well, s
Even
yeah.
that they are just like we want it to have
I
this.
love that you bring that up because my very next thing, it was incorporated. So the original, if you open up Sonic the Hedgehog, the first video game, the opening logo and the opening title screen, there are wings coming off of the logo and a banner that says Sonic the Hedgehog. It's all supposed to be the leather jacket emblem insignia on the guy's thing. It doesn't really make sense because Tails isn't introduced until the second game, but they have these wings as a
Oh.
part of the Sonic logo, but there's no real flying or anything like that. It is very much incorporated into the
Oh
original
wow.
tone. So like you said, I wish there was
That's
some
awesome.
element of this. A lot of people don't know that, but that was very much what he wanted to have this longer legacy kind of feel, even though it's fake because they just made it up there, you
I
know.
mean, it's there's part of that that's like, well, it's just a made up backstory, but at again, it's the idea of wanting this character to have come from that place is
Yeah.
very interesting. It's very interesting. Usually you think of yourself as your, your character's origin to some extent,
Mhm.
then they're like, "No, no, no, he comes from
Yeah.
like it that's very, very interesting."
Yeah, I love it. So with now we've got those 2 pieces, we're on to the 3rd piece, level design. Hirokazu Yasuhara is the level designer, and,
Mhm.
just to make sense of this, I'm trying to frame this in a linear sense, but all of these are mingling together, like, nothing is linear, this is
This
all
is right,
ideas at once. This is just so
we're a
it
little
makes
bit thick on the game jargon here. I know typically we're talking more in film and
Yeah,
novels and those type of, but these are the elements in which a game really comes together
yeah,
in full form. We've just gotten through the pieces that make the character. Well, now where does the character exist?
yeah,
And that is everything that is just as important as the character
yeah.
himself that makes the game.
And they're like I said, they're working on the level design as they're adjusting the character, so, like, Naka
Exactly.
and
It
Oshima
all
yeah.
walks together. It's this 3D puzzle that builds together until it's unstoppable.
Because they were doing prototypes of the game, futzing with the level design, and they had, like I said, had the rabbit with the ears that could grab things, but it's not working with the speed element, it's slowing it down, and then Naka, the programmer, wanted it to be one button because he's doing the programming stuff, and he, in terms of liking the speed as well, didn't like
Mm.
2, 1 for jump and 1 for attack, he just wants 1 for one thing, you know? So,
Mhm.
with that, then they're saying, "Okay, well, what animal, if we're not gonna use the rabbit, can roll into a ball?" So they tried
Mm.
armadillo, they tried hedgehog, now you can see how, like I said, all the
Yeah.
disciplines are merging together. It wasn't just like first this, then this. I got a lot of the stuff from Yasuhara. There's a great article, long form, where he kind of details his game design psychology because he's a master
Ooh.
in this and he continues into other video games, which we'll get into. But
Mhm.
it's too much for this episode. But if you're interested,
Mm.
I'll post a link in the show notes too. He's a genius when it comes to
So we should have done a three-parter.
on yeah, it's outside the bounds of usually what we talk about, but designing video games based on sociology, psychology, cultural psychology, how Americans versus Japanese people approach uh,
That's
completing
fascinating.
objectives. Like he's just it's amazing. But anyway, so some of the other stuff that they're merging their disciplines with, like I said, the rings that shoot out when he gets hit by a spike, he loses all his rings. It's
Mm.
cool, but it's also to show how powerful the Genesis was because rings are harder than coins and they're all coming out and overlapping. It's not just like a number gets becomes less. It's not,
Oh.
like they wanted
They're kinda
to
showing off a
yeah,
little.
some of the graphical things. And then the red shoes with the buckles was to match Michael Jackson's Bad album. The
Oh.
buckle shoes. They wanted to get the 90s culture. And then
Wow.
red and white, a lot of cultural symbology. Santa Claus, one of the most well known, and then America, red, white, and blue.
Boom,
Sonic,
baby.
red, white, and blue, as well.
They're just
Yeah,
trying to sell this to
yeah.
us.
And then the last one being saving animals from robots is very much in the 90s environmental trends of the time. Dr. Robotnik taking over these cuddly animals and turning them into
There you go.
robots.
Now it like feels like a full thing,
Mhm.
you walk before you can run.
Yeah,
I love what we just did, just tracking the little pieces about it. Well, we want to do a game. Well, what do people want in a game? Well, they don't want this in a game, or they're doing this. How do we stop them from doing that? Well,
yeah.
how do you build these parameters? What are the things? What can also roll into the ball? Well, we were already playing with this character. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
There's also an
Um,
underdog fighting element because 'cause they're like, "We gotta beat Mario and Nintendo." So
yes,
everything
yes,
also
yes,
there's an overlayer of it being informed by, "How do we do it better than them?"
yeah.
So speaking of which then, remember when he went around Central Park showing people random sketches and taking polls on what Americans would like? The number 2 most popular one was this bald mustache guy, and so then that becomes the villain, which is Doctor Robotnik or
Hmm.
Eggman. So essentially, Sonic is fighting Mario literally in the games, which I had never made that illusion.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, that did not occur to me.
Yeah, like we talked about with Shrek, it's they're trying to make it very apparent. We are beating Nintendo at this. We are making a point.
Even if it's wishful thinking at the
Yeah,
time,
yeah,
you got to get in the game and play with the team that showed up.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. So then with the team, this always astounds me. The full team for the first game was 7 people. Another programmer, 2 more designers, and 2 people for sound. And that's it.
Mm,
That's who made the first Sonic game, which seems
wow.
like an
Oh my
insane
god. What?
Yeah, that's just the way that
All
it
those
was.
people could fit in the room I'm
Yeah,
in.
yeah, crazy.
It's amazing.
And then Naka, the programmer, this is some of the weirdness of the whole thing. He got no credit. A lot of it was because they didn't want other studios to poach the people. It was almost like you didn't want them to know who did what. But he had a little
Right.
underhanded thing and displayed the names of the programmers in black text on a black background at the end. So
Ooh!
you would only know that if you looked in the code of the game. And he was really disillusioned and essentially leaves, but then gets lulled back in with a lot more money and a Ferrari. Like, he, like, had
Well, who wouldn't?
yeah. They got his love for speed, you know? They're like, "We're gonna you started this
You
whole
wanna
thing."
be
And so yeah,
fast like Sonic,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Well, you can go real fast.
So that's how they got them. So this was, released in June of '91, but like I said, the Super Nintendo and Super Mario World, which was the latest one that they had with Yoshi, was already out. A big thing they did, again, trying to appeal to the American audience, was they packaged Sonic with the Genesis consoles from there on out, which
Boom.
it wasn't before. And then this became the best-selling game of 1991 to the point where Miyamoto, who did Mario, apologized for Super Mario World, saying it was rushed, even though it was the best-selling Super Nintendo game. Since they got beat, they're like, "Oh, we did something wrong."
You went out so hard, the other team's coach had to
Yeah,
apologize.
yeah, exactly. And then in terms of because the movie side of things, they definitely play on his character and his how are you getting that from this type of a game that's made with 7
Right.
people? Um,
Right.
I'll post a link again. There's a really long video. This guy covers all the different animation from all of the Sonic video games over time. But in terms of
Mhm.
the first game, really what they were doing, it was about his emotions and
Really?
expressiveness. So way more than Mario. So like if you just leave him idling, Sonic stamps his foot and turns and looks at you as if he's like, "Come on, I want to go fast. What are
Oh,
you doing?"
right.
Stuff
I
like
do
that.
remember that. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And just the
I
yeah,
I do remember that,
the
him, like, begrudgingly want like, "Oh, come" like, I didn't and one I felt like one, like, tapped his didn't one have a watch? He, like,
Yeah, that
tapped
was
his
a
watch
later
at
one.
one
Yeah, yeah,
point.
yeah. Or points forward. Yeah. So in each
Yeah, yeah,
iteration,
yeah.
but with that, it's also like when he gets hit by the spikes, he's really expressive. His eyes are really wide and he flings. So it was
Yes.
just trying to emphasize in all these different ways how much cooler he was than Mario, both in his speed and his personality. He
Right.
was hip and edgy for the time. So I mean, I think that they try to keep true to that in the movies from what you've seen.
It's interesting. I think that's part of the plight here for the film, and especially the first one. The second one has a little bit of a different mission, but the first one I think is really all about getting you to buy into Sonic as a character, as a real character, a talking, smart,
Yeah.
real thing, which is kind of a big leap. And how are we in his world or is he in our? Like it has the whole job of setting up what the rules are, and at that same time, this is a character that has to go toe to toe with Jim Carrey
The living
in a
cartoon, yeah.
yes, and so, it's not for nothing that this character, actually makes it through and makes it to a sequel.
Mhm.
This character is full of life. I don't know whose idea it was to make him in love with chili dogs, but,
We'll
like,
get to that, yeah.
that's okay, like, I'm like, "Is that a movie? Is that I have no" like, at that point, but it's so wild and ridiculous that you can't help but the character being, you know,
Yeah.
having a lot to go off. So when you're saying he's out of from his design phase, well, they want him to be overly expressive and overly,
The
just
cool
like
'90s vibe, yeah, that's what they want.
making him a big
Presence,
character,
yeah,
even from the beginning has been such an important thing to the
definitely.
character and all.
And a big piece of it with the marketing of the time when this game first came out is, being different from Nintendo. There was which I is insane because nowadays, throwing barbs specifically at another company is kind of frowned upon.
It sounds weird when we keep because this isn't the first time we've talked about this. We've talked about it a few times, like, especially like through the back half of the '80s and through the '90s, that companies are
Yeah.
actively throwing shade at each other. We talked about it with Disney, or
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
other, the Disney competitor.
Yeah.
I really think the parameters, what I was drawing down on earlier, is an interesting thing here that we have seen a trend 30 years ago where companies were really passing the ball,
Yeah.
putting shout outs to each other in each other's games, healthy or not, whatever.
Yeah.
It was healthy competition. And it
Yeah.
helped create more than just Sonic, but Sonic is a leading
Yeah.
example of what that kind of competition really helped for. And I feel like we could use maybe some of that.
So much so in
Some of
the
it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Because well, you might, change your tune if you hear this. The marketing was they used their name, so I'll post a link to the videos. The catchphrase was, "Genesis
Yeah.
does what Nintendo don't." And they literally and there's backing chorus, which got stuck in people's heads of "You can't do this on Nintendo" is playing in the background, and then at the end, it says, "Genesis does what Nintendo don't." And the multiple of these ads of Genesis being on the back of a race car, the Super Nintendo being on a broken ice cream truck, like, it's just
Oh god, it's cartoonish, but there's some spirit there that is healthy. You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
yeah, Genesis does what Nintendo don't is grammatically wrong,
Oh
and
my
who
god.
cares? Because it worked. Well, also, so this is, tying, and you had mentioned it already, but the next year, Mortal Kombat comes out in the arcade, and then it goes to
Sorry.
goes to consoles in '93. Link to the episode in our show notes, but the Genesis had the real
Great
gore
episode.
version. It had what the Super Nintendo
Ooh,
didn't. So
ooh. So really, what Nintendo don't?
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. So it proved him right. The immediate fallout of this, I would say, perhaps is akin to using the balloon B-roll after. I mean, even though these aren't missteps, but I'm trying to make a parallel here because
Sure,
they
sure.
just go crazy. So Sonic 2 comes out, which has Tails and his supersonic version where he goes golden and is unstoppable.
Yes, yes.
And then Sonic 3, which then also includes Knuckles, and this is all the classic portly Sonic, where he looks like he kinda has a belly. I don't know if you're he's it's not the slender one, that hasn't come yet, but with all
Gotcha.
of this, 91 to 96, there's also a dozen spin-off games like Sonic Puzzle Games, Sonic Pinball, Sonic Kart Race, like,
Oh
it's just a
god.
lot
Oh man.
going on with him, which is also the start of the TV world and his
Right.
adaptation straight out the gate. So this was all my shows as a kid. I didn't have video games at home, but we had the VHSs of these and we rented them from Blockbuster. So that was my jam.
And I forgot that this existed until about 40 minutes ago. So,
Yeah.
not part of my child. you
Yeah.
well, yeah, that I was into what I was into, but most kids were into Sonic,
Yeah.
and I missed the boat. I'm living up to the title again, ladies and
I
gentlemen.
also don't know with this. I tried to find it, but I couldn't. Why they so there's two different shows. Literally, one of them is released a week after the other one, and they're running in parallel. And they
What?
both have different approaches to the Sonic character, and I don't know why this happened, but I it also speaks to kind of the confusion already of who he is, who he's appealing to, what they're trying to do with it, just throwing everything at it now.
What were they? How were they different?
So, yeah, they both ran from '93 to '96. The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog was the one that came out first. 65 episodes, very gag driven. This is where the chili dogs come from. It is
Thank
more
God.
like Looney Tunes. Or I would even describe it as kind of like Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner. Like Dr. Robotnik is Wile E.
Gotcha.
Coyote and his crazy inventions, and they're
I like that.
trying
Yes,
to
yes, yeah.
outdo, and he gets mucked
I
up and
can I can see that. Yeah.
very much goofy, silly. It's got this Sonic says at the end, like moral of the story, where it just breaks the fourth wall. And now, kids, here's what you do if you want to.
Oh, I love that. Oh, I love that.
So,
They do that same thing in Demon Slayer, the
oh,
anime,
really? Yeah.
and it's very much in that exact same that exact same tone. It's so cute.
Yeah. So, this is this one. And then a week later, Saturday morning cartoon, and it's darker. Robots
Hmm.
rule the city. There's these freedom fighters that are underground trying to stop Dr.
Oh, they
Robotnik.
went world
Dude,
building with it. They went wow.
this is the one I liked. It's almost like reminds me kind of like the Matrix, like a cyberpunk sort of vibe where
Wow.
they're trying to gain control of Mobotropolis, the city that he
Okay.
runs. What's weird, it's the same portly sort of Sonic, and both of them are voiced by Jaleel White, who did Urkel. Yeah,
Okay. Right.
but he was the
Right.
voice for both. He's the voice of Sonic at the beginning because he's also super popular on TV at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course.
Um,
That's perfect.
with this, then this is kind of how Sonic is getting introduced to kids outside of the game, such as myself, who didn't play them. But again, strange that it's two very different takes on it.
It's interesting. I mean, because I'm like, well, you're describing the first one, and I'm seeing the elements of that can work,
Yeah.
and I'm seeing a lot of the elements of it that honestly I see in the movies.
Uh-huh.
And the second one is like, okay, we're gonna Batman Beyond it,
Essentially, yeah. Yeah, and I mean, it's still silly and
which
for
is
kids, but yeah,
cool.
yeah, it's definitely
Sure,
I like that one more. That was
I
just
it's a hey, that's a big stab. That's a big swing, and I am for it. I mean, that's big. I mean, at least you're not getting that confused at which one you're watching. I
right. Um,
mean,
with this confusion comes on the video game side of it now, with all of the million things that they've come out with, I would consider this kind of the balloon retiring on its initial run after it's had some
mm,
some chances to get knocked down and
caught on a
yeah,
tree,
yeah.
eh?
So, 1996, behold, 3 dimensions in video games. The Sega Saturn is the console. It's been out for a year. Mario 64 on the Nintendo 64 and Crash Bandicoot for the PlayStation was already out. So now Sega is behind with their
Mm,
Sonic game for their new 3D console.
no,
They did make a couple. They tried. There was one that was an isometric view, which is like 2.5D. It's almost like a board
uh,
game, kind of like strategy games are very much in this top-down
like,
angle.
why did Tron come to mind? I don't
Kinda, yeah,
know. I'm like,
yeah,
wait.
yeah. They tried, a racing game. They just couldn't hang. There was a game called Sonic Extreme, which was a pure 3D, but it got canceled, and this is where
Hmm,
there was a film tie-in that also got canceled at this
really?
point.
This early?
Yeah, yeah, it
Okay.
was only at the treatment level, but
I mean, it would make sense if they've got 2 shows, all these games, all these properties. This is kind of the part of it that I've been wondering
yeah,
about is to I felt like there was a Sonic movie around the corner basically all through public school.
yeah.
And and then I forgot about it until it just it existed. But I've wondered why this didn't come out in 1999. Where was 1999 should have had Sonic and Space Jam 2 Race Jam with Space with Jeff
Yeah.
Gordon.
Well, so with this, yeah, like I said, the Sega Saturn, which is the console in this generation, like I said, they tried to do something, but
Mm,
they couldn't do the 3D thing correctly.
mm,
So here comes, you're right, the big redesign is in 99 with
mm.
their next console, the Dreamcast. And I would consider this, yeah, coming back with the balloon. They're like, we're coming back, baby. And
Right.
it's all new and it's better and it's not going to pop.
He's back.
So this is now,
I'm
yeah,
back.
Sonic Adventure in 3D, baby. And I kind of see this almost in a way as like damned if you do, damned if you don't, because they're like, it can't just be about going fast, right? Like maybe we have to do something else with this. So this has the voice acting. He's got an edgier attitude, and this is the one.
Oh,
This is
okay.
not the portly squat one. This is the longer limbs, the bigger head, the pointier
Mm,
nose. The probably what more people know Sonic as versus the retro
gotcha.
one. This Sonic Adventure game, though, they really went all out. You can play as 6 different characters, and not just
Wow.
through the same level. It's also completely different storylines and mechanics. They each have their own theme song. It's a
Okay.
lot that they
Yeah.
put into this. Also, there's a new head of the Sonic team that is helming this, Takashi Iizuka, and he's still the head of Sonic Team. So from here on out, he's the one leading all of this. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
What happened to the other people, Oshima, the artist, left to form a new studio on his own, and then
Mm,
Yasuhira, the level design guy, who's
yeah.
he moves to another company, which we'll get to what all that was, but they're gone.
Okay.
The best-selling game on the Dreamcast, of course, was this crazy multi-character one. Some people say, "Oh, this then starts their detrimental decline," because they're like, "Well, we gotta focus on all these other characters."
Yeah, they busted it wide open.
And
Now we got to that's exactly what Lucas said about to the director of Empire Strikes Back is you made a good one. Now we have to follow it up with even with a good one. Well, we're not going to do better than
yeah.
this.
So that is also with the gameplay versus just the story. Like now there's different elements to playing besides just going really fast, which is what Sonic and Tails did. There's like this one character, his whole plot line revolves around fishing. It's like, did I come to a Sonic game to play a character that fishes? I don't know. And with this, they can't really hang in the PlayStation 2 and Xbox market in terms of
Right.
their own console. So they get out of making consoles, Sega does, and they're saying, "We're just
Right.
gonna do games." And of all things,
Right.
coming back to the master, they port this to the GameCube, which is Nintendo's console in this realm,
Right.
which is how we get Mario and
See,
Sonic again.
I almost even forgot that they were such a major player in the console game through the
Yeah, yeah,
90s.
yeah.
It seemed I'm like, obviously, Sega, but, like, I forgot of when they got out of the game.
Yeah,
It seems like they were one of them, and then suddenly they weren't, and they went out and started doing strictly video
yeah.
games with no announcement to at least my 8-year-old self.
Right, right.
And I never noticed. I never noticed ever.
Yeah.
I'm only now going like, oh yes, at one point, at one point in the early 2000s, they said we're not doing that anymore. And
Yeah.
I'd never even like really
And
considered
in
that.
fact, now he's with Mario. Isn't that great for you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and honestly, it makes sense. I mean, who are we gonna stake sides
Yeah.
with in this international game? That makes sense. Let's put all our eggs in the same basket.
Yeah.
I love it.
Eventually, thereafter, just the Dreamcast ones get ported, but from then on out, depending on the Sonic
Yeah,
game, it's
yeah.
on the PlayStation 2 or it's on whatever. So this becomes the realm of, to me, downhill. This is the caught in the tree again after they bring the balloon around. They're trying many things. So then some of the games, Sonic Team, which is 4 teams of 3 each. They've added even more characters and more
More.
teams. And then this is also thereafter Shadow the Hedgehog gets his own video game with guns. There's also 10 different endings that you could potentially get with him.
Like Clue.
They're trying all sorts of different mechanics with this.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, in the early 2000s. Here's where we are on the adaptation side. In TV land, you get the show Sonic X, which is the whole roster of
Hmm.
characters. It's more of an anime style, and there's definitely more
Hmm.
character relationship development. So this is almost like the
Cool.
Gen
Yeah.
Zers below me would have liked this show versus the ones that
Mhm.
I watched. And then in Filmland, 2002, around this time, there was going to be an animated film that was based on the Sonic the Hedgehog series, the one that I like, the dystopian one.
Uh-huh.
It was dropped in 2007, though, because of a couple things. One, the licensing manager who had supported the project and was shuttling it along for years had died. And so
Oh,
a lot of the
yeah.
people along
Okay.
with that left, as well as corporate shifts at Sega, because now if you think about the
Yeah.
balloon thing, it's like we're going to take a step back. We're not going to come back for a while. Like the balloon didn't come back until this past year after.
Right.
No, they're not going to do that at all. They're doing a whole reboot of Sonic, everything he ever was. So this is
Wow.
the 15th anniversary, and new consoles have come out, the Xbox 360 and PS3, if you're tracking along with me in the history.
Wow.
So this is also like that to me was a huge jump in graphical capabilities,
Yeah.
technology.
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh, this is insane. This looks like."
That was like one of the last ones where it was obvious. It was so obvious the leap and bound over what they had done just a few years earlier, and it feels like each iteration since this point, basically, I'm seeing like less and less.
That one was massive to me too. Yeah. So
Yeah.
this then becomes Sonic 2006, just called Sonic the Hedgehog because it's a complete reboot. It's the name of the first game. It is the most unpolished, glitch-ridden, horrible animation and graphics, one of the worst games in
No,
the industry,
no,
talked
Sonic.
about all over. So I had to be like, "What
Uh,
happened here? Why? How could this happen?"
yeah. That doesn't just happen with all these bangers in the locker.
Yeah. Some of the things, the realistic tone and realistic graphics, like, they were inspired by Batman Begins, which had come out recently. It was this wave
Oh,
of
okay, yeah.
so he interacts with humans, which have an uncanny valley effect. Yeah.
Sonic got swept up in the Nolan hyper realism.
Grittier, yeah. And he doesn't have this in the game, but they had even considered more realistic fur and textures, which became the whole thing of the movie in where
He's got the
yeah,
quills.
where the fans said, "Oh god, this is horrifying." They were gonna do that for this game, and they toned it back a little bit, but they just couldn't hang with all of what they were trying to do to make it so realistic, as well
Right.
as Yuji Naka, who was the original programmer. He left Sega in the middle of this to form his own indie game company, and he consulted on some other things, but this was like restructuring of the company. They wanted to do a
Uh,
reboot. Everybody that was on the original is gone. So it's
wow.
interesting how with the newer movie, to bring it back to that, like, they really listened to the fans when they said, "We don't want the
Lord.
realistic thing." You know what I mean? Because it took
You
yeah.
know, I think it's a dangerous precedent.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
yes, it's very, very interesting. I think it's cool that at some level that they did listen to the fans, obviously.
Yeah.
At some level, though, I've got to flip this on its head on two fronts. I think number one, I really wish that the original version was how it was. I feel robbed because it was so horrible
Yeah,
looking. I want the whole movie to look that way. But on a more serious note, now with things like Kenobi on the forefront,
right.
I don't know if you heard all of the complaining about the villain in the Kenobi trailer. The whole internet is up
Yeah.
in arms because the villain doesn't have the same head shape as the pre-established animated version or the one that was in
Right.
the background shots of episode 2. And it's things like that
Mhm.
where the fact that this character's head shape might be a little bit different than the one in the cartoon, that's a non-issue. That's not an issue of adaptation, really.
Right.
That's a stylistic choice. When you listen to fans, to set a precedent that listening to them is a good thing outright, you really run the risk of damaging a performance and a full character,
Yeah.
much like people don't understand what happened with Bane in Dark Knight Rises. That happened to Bane and his voice. They had to completely re record every bit of
Uh-huh.
dialogue for that character because the internet got upset because they couldn't hear the dialogue of Bane in the IMAX prologue
I
preview
remember that, yeah.
on a camcorder. And so, because of the internet watching it on off someone's camcorder, and they couldn't understand Bane, that forced the studio heads to make the filmmakers re-record the entire character's dialogue. And this is all coming to a point of like, I like that they maybe redesigned Sonic and gave Sonic a design that worked for the fans and honestly does make the movie work. I
Yeah.
worry that it sets a very, very dangerous precedent at to what point it really matters. Um,
Yeah, in the long term. I will say I know that in terms of the Sonic thing, it was over reported, like, how difficult it was to redo, and, like, they had just done that, and they hadn't done any it wasn't like we had to go back and redo the
The
entire
movie
movie.
wasn't done. Yeah, no, the movie
Yeah,
wasn't done. So, I mean, it's a lot of work, and it's certainly when you're in the midst of a train like that, that
yeah,
doesn't feel like it can stop. It's certainly a lot to stop and redesign and figure it
yeah,
out and throw shots away and come back with a new shot. I get it,
yeah.
but it's not. I think you're totally right. A bit over reported when that trailer comes out. Trust me, that movie is in shambles, baby. You are Let me try, child. You are seeing the best of the best. Do not worry
Yeah.
about it.
So I think 2 more things to that. One, if you do wanna see the original Sonic, the only thing that I could find was because we had talked about in a lot of things with marketing and toys and things of that nature, they had already made and put out children's Halloween costumes of the original Sonic, and, it's not quite so horrifying because the face was the thing that people were really upset about, but
Right.
still the proportions of being a human child, like, it matches the original thing, and then also just that it's all fur and it, like, his hand it was just weird, he doesn't have gloves, but there
Yeah.
is the children's costume, it obviously doesn't exist anymore, but I found I'll post a link, you could buy one on eBay for 50 bucks. They
Oh,
still exist, so if you
yes.
just wanna look at that, it's weird because it's got the real looking hair
Thank you
and
so
all that.
much,
And
Taylor.
then the second thing to consider is, back to the 2006 game that was a disaster because they tried to do too much and make it realistic. You'd think they would say, "Okay, well, let's take a step back, see what the fans like." Like I said, like the balloon, just take some time to plan it out. Nope.
Hmm.
Games every year of all different kinds. So the next thing to come out was Sonic and the Secret Rings, which is sort of this Arabian Nights feel, and the villain is an evil genie. And then
Ooh,
immediately after that, Sonic and the Black Knight, medieval Europe, and he's got a sword.
so tell me real quick. So we're going through and we're finding some different villains and stuff, but is Mr. Robotnik really the main guy, the
Gone.
main one? Gone. He's
Has
gone.
nothing to do with
My
Easter. Yeah.
God.
To my knowledge, maybe he's involved, but I know that people are just
Gotcha.
like, this is not at all anything to do with it. And him with the
I
sword
was.
slows down the speed
Uh,
mechanic, like you literally stop to slash. It just doesn't work at all. The culmination kind of that I feel with this, the game that I played in high school, because I thought, oh, there's a new Sonic game, was Sonic Unleashed, which was for all
Ooh.
consoles, and he's Sonic, and then in the other half, he's a werehog, where he's this werewolf, and it's all about fighting, and it's slow, and it's horrible gameplay.
Whoa.
The Sonic
What?
levels were amazing to me, all this other open world junk, the slow fighting junk, but I was like, this is really cool. And if you think about all that that's going on with another million games, the context, the year before this is the start of these epic franchises on Xbox and PlayStation. So
Right.
Assassin's Creed, Mass Effect, big franchises had come out, as well as Uncharted, which just had a movie.
Right,
But the
right.
connection here is that Hirokazu Yasuhara, who was the level designer, this
Mhm.
is the company that he moved to, was Naughty Dog. So he was the game designer on Uncharted, which is
Oh,
renowned for
yeah.
its
Wow.
gameplay. Because and he also was responsible for Jack and Daxter, which was that other
Wow,
PlayStation. Yeah,
really?
yeah, for the
Yeah.
design.
Oh,
All
yeah,
those are
I mean, that
heavily
seems
regarded.
when naming it, it's like, "Oh, yeah, that he I see
Yeah.
it."
So I loved all those. So finally, with all of these ups and downs and trying a million things, they do take a step back for the 20th anniversary in 2011. They do, which I think is a bit ahead of its time, Sonic Generations. They bring the
Hmm,
old levels back. There's some 2D and 3D. It's a total makeover. They merge the timelines. They get the chubby Sonic in. It's like they meet each other. It's kind of into the Spider-Verse, Doctor Strange, multiverse
ooh, yeah.
madness. But in 2011, in the video game world, and people love it, it's
Wow.
finally they're doing well. In terms of doing things well, they're like, you know what, we need a complete new redesign.
What?
Even though we went
You know what? It's time. Time to redefine it, you know?
and what they try to do differently, we're going to make this a whole big cohesive franchise, and it's now all called Sonic Boom.
Right.
Sonic Boom is a TV series on Cartoon Network where they redesign all the characters, change a bit. You know, the comedy is more like
Okay.
self-aware meta humor. There's several game tie-ins which are not by Sonic Team. They feature action and exploration and a ton of characters, and these are some of the worst-selling Sonic games that they've ever made.
Good
Yeah,
lord.
but the show at least brought in a new audience on Cartoon Network, and
Yeah,
that would be again like the third generation of this of being like, oh, I know that one, and
right.
what the characters represent there. I guess then that's what's interesting is like with the movie coming into bear, it had been trying to go off and on and was in turnaround, and eventually Paramount got it because they didn't even really know what to base it off of
It was
necessarily.
on until 2007, and then it was, kinda off the books from there until as around when Paramount
Yeah,
gets it?
yeah, yeah.
And Paramount picks it up about when?
2017 or 16? Yeah,
Okay, 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 okay. Well, at least when they pick it up, they didn't waste too much
yeah.
time.
And so what's interesting is Jeff Fowler, this is the first one that came out in 2020. This is his feature directorial debut.
Wow, yeah.
His claim to fame with Sonic is that he had worked for this company that did all of the cutscenes for Shadow the Hedgehog in '05 and the
Oh,
hated
yeah.
Sonic reboot in '06. In his defense, it's like that's what those things were praised for was how good the cutscenes
Yes.
were, like the pre-rendered
Yes.
by a actual movie studio type situation, not the actual.
He also worked as an animator on Where the Wild Things
Oh,
Are in 2009. I love that movie personally.
yeah.
That's an interesting one.
Well, and that's also kind of like
It's
a
just looking at the animation angle here, you
and it
know.
makes sense maybe if he's directing it, why they would say, "Oh, do the realistic fur thing," because it seems like that's what he'd worked
Mhm.
on with this, like, both in Where the Wild Things
Exactly.
and these. So it only
Yes.
makes sense that he would try that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Some of the stuff that was interesting with this and then the more recent one in 2022 is Ben Schwartz. He was friends with the guys that were pitching this to the studios,
Right.
and he
Right.
was part of the test reading because he's a voice actor. He's done other acting stuff as well, but they kept him from the because sometimes that happens with temp music where it's like, "Oh, we really like this song in this scene. Can we just get the rights to it?" And in this
Right.
case, it was like, "Oh, who's the guy that did the little test thing to pitch?" You know? And it's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, it's this guy. Oh, cool. Let's just get him to." So he was like, "This is the most craziest." It was like a favor to a friend that I knew I wasn't gonna get paid for, that might not even become a movie, and it's kinda just one of those stories
Well,
of
man, I'm
yeah.
Sonic.
And now I do voicemails for my friends' kids, and they're so surprised, like, all kinds of stuff. It's kind of a wonderful situation for him and rare.
Yeah.
I mean, he's also an actor, but in the sense of, like, they didn't get Ben Stiller or somebody who is a well-known actor
I am so happy that somebody like Ben Schwartz is in the role and not Chris Pratt.
Right.
I just I am voice acting is its own detailed industry.
Yeah,
And I get weirded out when I see things like Zendaya taking Lola Bunny's role. Like that's very strange. That's an established character with somebody that's been playing that character basically the entire
yeah.
time, and it's just supposed to like be cool that Zendaya suddenly is doing it. I guess so that we can money launder in public. I don't really like that's the best I can do.
Well, but
I'm
yeah,
just tired of it. I'm so happy that Ben Schwartz is
yeah.
is somebody like him is in this role because I mean honestly he sounds like he's having a blast doing it.
Yeah. Well, and the big one that came out of this recent one that you saw, 2022's, the voice of Tails is Colleen O'Shaughnessy, who had been doing the role since 2014 in everything related to Tails. And this is huge because
Hmm.
she's a professional voice actress,
Thank you. This is
and they
this
could have gotten
is
Zendaya.
how
Yeah.
they should do it. This is how you do it.
Yeah.
This and I know that they still get Idris Elba for
Yeah. Yeah.
Knuckles. But look, that two of the three,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Really the crux of the film is Sonic understanding the value of a team, the value of a squad, the value of a family, so that in turn they can actually turn
Yeah.
Knuckles later down the road. And that doesn't come without Tails. So when we got to Tails' scene of really like telling Sonic how much Sonic means to him, I fell in love with the
Mhm.
voice. It was very. It was sometimes with these things for me, they don't. The first scene, I'm like, "Ugh, never," and then get me to like the moment, and then I'm in love,
Yeah.
and then I couldn't hear it any other way, and it was very much that
Yeah.
way with Tails. So it was really interesting because I was very sharp on it when they were introduced. I went, doesn't feel like he's in the scene. I don't like it,
Well
and then warmed me up, and now I loved it. I loved by the end. I loved
well,
it.
and like you said, it's beautiful that it is the
The voice.
person who had been doing it
Yes, I
forever
had
and
no idea. Again, I had no concept of that. I try to go into things blind. I
Mhm.
make that's kind of the point. Tails' voice in particular was an element that I warmed up to and then really liked by the end of it because of number one, the character's place in the thematics of the narrative.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of the keeping things, the money laundering, which started not on purpose with Robin Williams being the genie, because the genie literally was Robin Williams, and then therefore
Yeah.
everybody was like, "Oh, well, we'll just put the big
But
names." Yeah.
again, like love Zendaya.
Yeah.
Zendaya. I love
Yeah.
God. We did Euphoria. Go listen to the episodes. I get it. But again, not the same thing as a Robin
Right.
Williams. Robin Williams as a voice talent brings a lot to the table. I
Yeah.
don't know that Chris Pratt
Yeah.
does. I'm an interesting. I don't. And this is not about Zendaya. This is not about Chris Pratt. But it's just about these typically people that are a package deal, and we are suddenly now packaging on one dimension, and they're ultimately their talents are not built on that one dimension, and there are a
Yeah.
whole industry of people who
Well, and
are.
I think the reason, if I'm correct, that you're bringing up Chris Pratt is because the Mario movie was announced, and he
Yeah.
is
Well,
the Italian plumber when there is a guy who has been doing the voice since forever. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and so I think that that's very much what, if we can draw an end to this, where the film has taken
Yeah.
us, it is people relate to the earnestness with which they made these Sonic movies versus some of the other games and some of the other attempts at
Yeah.
things that
Yeah.
and comparing it to other animated children's media, like you're saying, where it's like, cool,
Right.
what kid cares that it's Dwayne Johnson and Kevin Hart? Yeah.
Exactly. They don't matter to them. Oh my gosh. And I mean, I gotta hand it to him in terms of just like going to the movies and weighing the two movies. They really opened up the scope of this one. The first one is so, like I said, and they had the task of getting you to buy into Sonic as a character. But now the second one, you get to kind of buy into him and the world. And they did really well with making the team and family aspects of these
Yeah.
thematics shine through. I mean, I saw it at 2 p.m. with a bunch of
Kids.
with a bunch of kids. I can tell you, it was clapping when when the lights went down. It was wild. I think the thematics here, the morals here, really really poked through in a way that I didn't expect because it all hinges on Knuckles' turn.
Yeah, yeah.
Mr. Robotnik is using him and being able to flip that over and be like, actually, you belong with Sonic, and that's kind of your crew. You, him, Tails. the weight and value in all of that. I found that to be really, really
Yeah.
strong,
Well, and that's probably what
and I
people
just didn't
yeah.
expect
Well, and like you said, that
it.
like hopefully going through all the stuff that he's done, it's like they were building up the team in the old 2D ones, and then when they started doing a bunch of it was like it was all about teams and his side characters, and really when if you're
And
yeah.
now we have all the pieces on the board. I really that was fun about this, is to finally have everybody have these characters to play with. I think it really worked for the movie, where it might have been a lot at some times when you're introducing them into the games because there's no story to go off of. Well, this is a movie. It builds that story along the way. So suddenly, man, I have investment in Tails.
Yeah.
It really works, and it's fun when he shows up in a biplane.
There's some of that plane stuff bringing it back around, yeah. Yeah,
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly.
Because it is fun. I think that's the ultimately at
So
the end of the
that's
day,
all it should
that's
be.
what they intended in making the first game. They're like, "Can we make this more fun than anything else that's out here?"
Let me just put a big check on
Yeah.
that. If anything else, if not anything else, both of these two movies were just
Yeah.
fun. And I think that's a huge success for doing stuff like this. This is a really exciting upswing that we're on. Let us know if you want more video game stuff. There's certainly more video game stuff out there
Yeah.
on the horizon. Keep a shout out to us if you want more of something like this. Thank you guys for sticking with us. This was great. I learned an immense amount about something that's just been in the peripherals of my brain the entire
Yeah.
time I've been conscious. So if you enjoyed this, please let us know. Let us know what you're interested in. Let us know what you're reading. Let us know what you're watching. You never know when we'll do an episode about the thing you want to know all about.
Reach out to us at IlliteratePod on Instagram for any and all messages. And then if you would, give us a rating wherever you listen to podcasts.
It helps so much. Please give us a rating.
All right. Thank you all for listening, and we will catch you next week.